The day my daughter told me I wasn't family anymore, the wind chimes across the street wouldn't stop agreeing with the weather. I sat at a table, soup cooling, phone glowing in her hand, and felt something unhook inside me, quiet as a thread pulled from a sweater. "You don't belong to this family," she said, and I believed her for about 3 breaths. Then I believed me. I didn't rise. I watched the way the light found the rim of my water glass, the way my granddaughter's shoulders hunched like a small bird in rain. I set my spoon down with ceremony. No one else deserved that moment, and I said the smallest sentence that changed everything. "Remember today." Afterward, outside, I slid the brass key from my purse and held it like proof. The key to my house. My porch. My quiet. It pressed a map into my palm, the kind your hand remembers even in the dark. I drove home through a city that did not know it had witnessed an ending and brewed tea in my favorite blue mug with the chip that never cut anyone. The kettle's whistle arrived like a friend who knew when to talk and when to set a hand on your shoulder. I stood in my hallway, under the print that once hung over my husband's desk, and said it aloud so the house would hear. "I'm not a door you slam. I'm a door I lock." On the entry table I placed 2 objects, the brass key, cool and certain, and my yellow blouse, the one my daughter calls too young for a woman who keeps a list of specialists by the phone. I draped that blouse over the back of a chair like a flag that belonged to whoever could show up and mean it. In the morning I called my lawyer, Daniel, orderly, sleeves always a little rolled, his desk a sermon on the kindness of straight lines. "We'll update the papers," he said, "and we'll do it in your time." I called my banker, Sylvia, whose voice lives in the same neighborhood as Brisk Mercy. "We're tightening access," she said. "Your accounts are your name and your weather." I kept walking, literally, because motion has a talent for telling the truth. Around the lake the ducks had a schedule. A boy on a bench practiced quiet with his father. I sat 2 benches over and tried on a different kind of stillness. It fit. When the chimes across the street spoke that night, they didn't sound like witnesses. They sounded like tools. The plan grew in the same notebook where I keep grocery lists and quotes I don't argue with. Page 1. Stop cooking where love is treated like a coupon, redeemed, tossed, expected again. Page 2. Turn grief into grammar. Page 3. Soup first. Rules visible. Leave by 8. And because I am a woman who believes in symbols that earn their keep, I framed the phrase I would hand to myself whenever I got tired. The biggest victory is signing in the right places, then stepping onto the porch. I underlined stepping once. It looked right. The next Sunday, nobody got my soup. I gave it to myself. It tasted like a promise that had been waiting in my pantry a long time. When you're 70, clarity likes mornings. I woke early, put on navy, the color of telling the truth without a speech, and carried the brass key in my pocket like ballast. The bank first. Sylvia met me at her desk, the pens on chains behaving like jewelry. We reviewed beneficiaries, locked down access, added alerts that would ring like common sense. "No one moves your money without talking to your voice," she said. "We'll make sure the voice is yours." At Daniel's, I rewrote the future with the patience a garden uses on April. Lily, my granddaughter, would still receive what belonged to love. The rest would go to places that know how to say thank you with action. St. Brigid's Community Center, a scholarship at the college in my husband's name for women starting over, small gifts to the friends who show up with pie and ragged jokes. We added a sentence about a park bench under the maple that overachieves at shade. A plaque. 8 words that sounded like instruction and blessing at once. Water respect. Gratitude grows. "You'll need witnesses," Daniel said. "I have women," I said. We signed. The pen had a heft that made every letter sit up. Each page I turned felt like a step from a darkroom into one with windows. On my way home, the town congratulated me without meaning to. A teenage girl steadied a grocery cart for an old man who fought gravity and won. A dog waited at a crosswalk like someone taught him how not to be a fool. The sky picked the blue that makes you forgive things you can't fix. That afternoon I walked with Rose and Nadine and Patrice, women who start their sentences with "I brought" instead of "you should." I told them what I'd done. They didn't applaud. They nodded with the gravity of people who know applause is loud, while respect is heavy. "Bring the yellow blouse to the signing," Nadine said. "Hang it on the chair before you sit. Let the fabric learn the view." At home the porch knew me like a favorite recipe. 2 soft creaks at the top step, a third if you linger. I set the papers on the entry table beside the key and the blouse. The chimes played 3 notes and made a point of not resolving. The house didn't feel empty. It felt like it had been waiting for me to remember that a woman alone is a woman with room. When the phone rang, I let it. Voicemails sorted themselves into a stack. I could lift one by one. My daughter's messages did that trick apologies do when they still expect a coupon at the end. My son-in-law, Brandon, left 2 pitches disguised as worries. The kettle sang. The phone didn't win. I wrote a letter to future me, folded it, and tucked it under the frame where we keep my husband's yard sale clock. "You are not a radiator for other people's weather. You're a woman with a front door and a reliable porch light. Use them." I slept like someone who knows where the flashlights are. In the morning, I put on my walking shoes and my softest defiance, and I went to St. Brigid's with a bag of donated chargers and a promise to teach a small room of stubborn people the sorcery of voice memos. "Say your name and one true thing," I told them, tapping the red button. "Let your people hear your breath." The room practiced laughter until it became a form of confidence. Ms. Ruth sent a recording to a grandson she worried was forgetting her voice. "I'm here," she said. "The sky looks like it plans to behave." He wrote back a string of fireworks. We passed the phone and passed the Kleenex and called it a class. When I drove home, the lake did that nickel-colored thing it does when it wants you to think about beginnings you didn't authorize and endings you did. I put the car in park, laid my hand on the brass key and said, "This is the right kind of heavy." Some days demand theater. The day I invited my daughter and her husband to my living room, I didn't. I set coffee on a tray and slid my digital recorder into the napkins like a shy instrument. When they arrived, their clothes tried to be business. Their eyes tried to be Sunday school. Lily stayed home. This was for adults pretending to be them. They pitched me a store that fit in a pretty deck and nowhere else. Numbers that behaved like fiction. A location that looked like a decision made by someone who thinks foot traffic is a personality trait. 200,000, Brandon said, as if he were quoting the price of bread. "Family venture," my daughter said, like reassurance, not a plan. "Guarantees." I asked. "Competition?" "Plan B." They offered family and feelings. I asked for math. They called me negative. I called it daylight. We kept our voices nice enough for neighbors. I let them finish. Then I said the line I'd rehearsed only in my bones. "I'm not investing." The word no is a hinge. The room swung differently. "Because this isn't a plan," I added, "and because last Sunday you told me I didn't belong to you." They left polite, like people who practice their exits in mirrors. The recorder turned off. The air changed temperature. I typed a transcript I hoped I'd never have to use and filed it next to sentimental things that know how to behave when called upon. My mother's ring, a photo of my daughter at 5 with a grass stain shaped like Nebraska on her knee. The next day I signed Daniel's pages. The yellow blouse draped over the chair back for a single second before I dressed it back onto its hook. The pen sang. The witnesses signed. I walked out of his office and did a small, private thing you only ever do once. I forgave myself for forgetting my own name in a house I paid for. That night I turned my porch into a small church. I poured tea, I invited quiet, I put the brass key on the table like a paperweight for calm. Rose sat with me, and we considered the exact size of the sky. "You're not mean," she said. "You remembered scale." We listened to the chimes argue with the breeze. We let the winning side be mercy. In the morning a letter arrived from St. Brigid's printed on thick paper with a crest that insists on manners. "Your gift will put devices in 8 hands and voices in 8 throats that thought silence was their future." I framed it and set it beneath the capacity letter from my doctor, a gold seal that glints when the afternoon shows off. My hallway began to look like a gallery dedicated to proof. The doorbell chimed mid-afternoon. Brandon stood on my porch with supermarket hydrangeas and a smile that sells cars. I let the screen door stay latched. "A minute," I said, generous and wary. He pitched again, smaller number, fewer details, a new tone that sounded like velvet over nails. "No," I said again, "the kind of no you put in a thermos and sip on long winter walks. You can use the co-parenting app. You cannot use my porch." He tried a different performance. "It's not good for Lily to see. That's why you're out there," I said, and closed the wooden door gently like a teacher who knows how to end a lesson. I went to the kitchen, pulled open the drawer where tools and mysteries live together, and touched the recorder. It remained a mirror, a place that proves you said what you said. I tucked it back. Some receipts you keep but never show. I turned on the radio, and an old song rescued a part of me that had been waiting for someone to call its name. You can't go to a cemetery out of anger. Respect doesn't like the taste. I went on a Thursday because grief and paperwork had finally shaken hands. The dew offered small mercy. The maple pretended to be older than it was. My husband's stone did that stern thing granite does when it's trying to be tender. I signed. I told him. You would have liked the lawyer. He straightens his paper like you straighten time. I updated him the way you update men who didn't teach you everything but taught you when to stop itemizing. I put my hand on the stone like a benediction. Give me a nod, I said. Or don't. I already know. The wind found my wrist and answered with a chill that was not unkind. On the way home, I stopped at the diner and ate lemon meringue pie because grief is best friends with sugar that holds its shape. The waitress called me Han the way waitresses have kept towns from falling apart since the first counter. I wrote a sentence in my notebook with a hand that had just remembered its pressure. Permission given, permission kept. At St. Brigid's a week later we recorded a thing that became something else. Old News, we called it, voice memos with lipstick, a podcast for people who remember how the sky looks when it minds its business. Ms. Ruth read the weather of 1963, Ms. Alvarez explained a towel warming sacrament, and Mrs. Quinn taught time management with egg timers and dignity. We laughed the kind of laughter that counts as therapy in places without copays. The bench arrived 3 weeks after that, installed by men in vests who know that a city's soul is its places you can sit without buying anything. We carried peonies in a jar and a folded blouse like a superstition. I draped the yellow over the back for a heartbeat so the fabric could learn the view, then folded it away and took my place. The plaque offered its 8 words with a shine that felt like it had been waiting to do this job since they made it. Water respect, gratitude grows. Lily swung her legs, counting pebbles into the dirt like a new religion. We ate lemon bars and called it communion. A stranger sat later, read, and did not need to learn our names to be part of it. Back home, the hallway gallery got a new picture, me and Lily on the bench, the plaque legible, the yellow blouse like a smile folded at the frame's edge. Between the capacity letter and the St. Brigid's thank you, the bench photo looked like a translation. Law made tender, charity made wood. I put the brass key on the table. I brewed tea. I let the porch do what porches do in America when the day has asked too much. Turn you back into a person who can face a kitchen without weeping into the dishwater. The chimes negotiated with the breeze, and I let them. When my daughter texted a week later, "Mom, can Lily come for Saturday?" No strings. I wrote back what my therapist would have approved if I had 1, 2 to 5. On time in both directions. She replied with a thumbs up that felt like a grown-up's handshake. We would see. At 2 on the dot, Lily knocked the way she'd invented. Tap tap, pause, tap. She held up a wooden spoon like a scepter and asked if we could make clouds. Meringues, I translated. The mixer hummed a lullaby. Egg whites turned into peaks that remembered snow. We held the bowl upside down over each other's heads and trusted physics. We piped sugar into hope and slid it into the oven like a letter with no return address. At 4:59, the doorbell rang. Tessa, the name I decided to use in my head for my daughter when I needed to remember her at 5, stood with her hands visible and her mouth on the side of honesty. 5, she said. 5, I echoed. On time is a kindness you can measure. She asked to visit the porch for exactly 1 minute and used it to say one thing: "I have therapy Thursdays." That sentence was a stitched wound, a bench rule, a door held for someone coming behind. "Good," I said. "Keep your receipts." She smiled at the wordplay and left. We built small routines that made a cathedral out of weeks. Wednesdays at the diner for 30 minutes. Bad chairs, good coffee, lemon bar split down the middle so neither of us could pretend we were the generous one. Thursdays at St. Brigid's. Apricot cookies and voice memos that convinced grandchildren their elders still had a voice. Saturdays with Lily. Science projects that explode politely, and a game we called Under Table Stars with glow-in-the-dark constellations taped to the underside of the dining table so we could lie on our backs and whisper about weather no one can forecast. I kept the hallway frames honest. On days we practiced respect out loud, I slid a note behind the bench photo. On days I dropped the ball, I put a lemon candy in the bowl on the entry table and made myself earn it by wiping the kitchen counter until it could see itself. When my son-in-law sent a letter withdrawing his stupid threats, capacity this, manipulation that, I put it under the walking tour map the city mailed later. A dotted line marked the route that now included our bench as a stop called Little Kindness. They added a tiny lemon icon beside my street because somewhere a municipal employee loved a joke that committed. And because hope loves errands, I stood one day in the safe deposit room with Sylvia in banker grey and Tessa in quiet shoes. "View only," I said, unlocking my box. I narrated, she listened. Deed, scholarship, St. Brigid's receipt, the photo of kindergarten Tessa with that lawless curl. The velvet pouch with my mother's ring. Tessa looked at it and did not reach. "That's from the Thanksgiving when we burned the rolls and didn't burn the day," she said. "Yes," I said, and we closed the lid. The lock made a sound like a boundary that didn't need to raise its voice. Summer put its hand on the day and didn't take it back. I kept the blinds drawn. The porch handled afternoons the way old women handle secrets. Air moving, ice sweating, gossip that was mostly gratitude. We put up a lemonade stand as an experiment in public kindness. The sign in Lily's serious hand. Lemonade. First glass free if you look tired. Underneath, smaller. Bench rules on request. We squeezed lemons into a pitcher that remembered harvests. The mint leaves made the air behave. People stopped. A mail carrier, a teenager in a team shirt with the kind of hunger you can't fix with sugar, a woman who said, "I sat on your bench and our argument went better." We poured. We listened. We said, that syllable that keeps other people's stories moving. Brandon walked by once, eyed the table, then kept walking past the bench like someone who'd forgotten his own last name. He didn't stop. I didn't wave. Lily sold him a cup the next week and gave him the tired person discount without asking permission from anyone. He drank, nodded, and left a normal $1. Progress is rarely cinematic. The podcast reached a small station. Tuesdays at 11, our 12-minute episodes became radio. Ms. Ruth read recipes like litigation for tenderness. Mrs. Quinn taught timers for cookies and arguments. Mr. Ortiz sent his brother a voice memo. "It's quiet here the good way. The soup behaves. Call me when the kettle sings." The phones lit up. One complaint about lemons. We decided it meant we were alive. The bench grew a reputation. A man with a thermos. Evan, I learned, sat mornings with the lid open like he'd saved a seat for steam. Teachers graded there on Tuesdays. 2 joggers paused, read the plaque, and adjusted their pace like men who'd been told to lower their voices in a library and didn't resent the librarian. On a night the air finally remembered mercy, Tessa texted, "Dinner at my place Sunday? Soup first. I'll chop onions. You bring rules." I brought the yellow blouse instead and hung it on the back of a chair like a woman who trusts fabric more than speeches. The lights flickered mid-meal. The building went dark. Nobody panicked. We lit a candle and let the rain talk first. Lily set a glass pebble by the flame and named it Breathing Rock. When the power returned, we added a 4th apartment rule to the fridge. When the lights go out, light a candle, then friendly silence. We ate brave soup in full sentences and left by 8. In my hallway that night, The frames looked like witnesses and the ceramic bird like a juror with a good heart. I pressed my palm to the brass key and said the sentence I use when I don't trust the day to remember me. I am a woman with a porch. That's not everyone's emergency. September cleared its throat, and the heat obeyed. The maple wrung its leaves in the park. The bench held a square of honest shade like a promise. Then a storm arrived with sleeves rolled. In the night a branch came down. Thud, sigh, quiet. Morning unveiled the green tangle and a congregation that forms when a familiar thing needs rescue. Linda with a rake, Mr. Mercer with a handkerchief and 70 years of opinions. Two teenagers removing headphones because public grief is instructive. Evan with his thermos and a posture that makes space. No heroics, Linda said, wielding the rake like liturgy. We cleared the light stuff. Parks arrived with chainsaws and competence. Benches fine, the foreman reported. Plaque took a scratch. He wiped it with his sleeve the way good men wipe their mouths before speaking. Sawdust floated like confetti for a ceremony we didn't plan. Lily arrived breathless and added a fifth rule to the card we keep for such matters. If something falls on you, wait for helpers. Back home I brewed tea and called Mrs. Delgado. We're on the air Tuesday, I said, and the bench just got its first sermon in the language of storms. The old news episode that week was a 12-minute corrective on the modern urge to yell. Ms. Ruth taught how to say goodbye on the phone without sounding like a threat. Mr. Ortiz left a second message for his brother and didn't cry this time until the last word. We sat in a circle afterward, silently happy we'd trimmed our laughter to fit the station's request and still felt whole. At the diner the next day, Tessa slid a small envelope across the table. Inside, the bench at dusk, the plaque catching a coin of evening, Lily midlaugh, a stranger walking his dog into a better mood. For your hallway, she said. Behind the sunrise it went. Proof likes layers. Layering keeps it warm. The park mailed a thank you for civic spirit displayed during limb removal. I taped it behind the walking tour map. The pear magnet held like faith. The bench appeared as stop 7, little kindness. The index showed a lemon slice icon. Somewhere in Parks and Rec, a woman whose job is thank you notes did a small, good mischief with clip art. Somewhere, a man with a thermos decided to lower his shoulders without asking anyone for permission. The scratch on the plaque dulled with a drop of mineral oil and became a story you didn't have to retell every time. I wrote a line in the notebook. We repair in public, we rest in private, and we let furniture preach what we're tired of repeating. Then I put my hand on the brass key and let the house agree. If there's a secret to getting older with your dignity intact, it's this. Keep a bench, a kettle, and 3 women who text you pictures of their gardens like weather reports. Rose sent peonies with a caption, open on purpose. Nadine reminded me to bring the yellow blouse to ceremonies and not to arguments. Patrice taught me a new word for men who try to sell you your own life, renters. Sundays became what they were meant to be the first time someone invented soup, a table with rules. Tessa came early to chop onions, knife down when she talked, which she was proud to remember. Lily set her napkin like a sail and recited vocabulary words she planned to live by. Benevolent, tempered, integrity. We defined them in the plainest English we could. Then we passed the butter like mercy. May arrived, too. A friend Tessa introduced without a summary. She warmed store-bought bread and called it participation. We called it communion. I used to think apologies were confessions, she said once, watching Tessa own a tiny sin at the laundry room. Now I think they're receipts. We put that on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a pear because pears are proof that gravity can do manners. The radio show kept a heartbeat on Tuesdays. Old news learned to fit lessons inside 12 minutes without hurrying them to death. We covered how to make time behave, use a timer for cookies and for arguments. When it dings, remove both from heat. What to do with rain, first listen, then towels. Phone calls like they used to be, say your name, say your want, say one honest compliment for the day, then stop. The station sent a postcard. Your laughs can spill a little. We'll make room. We did. We always had. View only became routine at the bank. Once a year, Sylvia scheduled a review that felt like a dentist appointment for paperwork. Tessa put the tiny receipt in her pocket like a child pressing a leaf into a book. We looked, we nodded. I locked the box. No begging, no speeches. Trust is a window, Patrice had said, not a passcode. We kept it that way. On a morning that announced itself with dry light and good knees, I found a letter in teacher cursive. Dear Ms. Grant, it read. England 101, A. It felt like taking my foot off the brake and finding out the road is kind. Marisol. I slid it beneath the ceramic bird in the frame choir and let the wall grow a new heartbeat. The phone rang that afternoon with a voice I didn't know and didn't fear. This is City Parks, it said. We put your bench on the self-guided tour. We hope that's okay. It was better than okay. It was proof a town can write a thank you in dotted lines and icons. I boiled water. The kettle cleared its throat. The brass key warmed under my palm. The yellow blouse, not worn, held the hallway together like color can. We made a lemonade stand version 2. Free if you tell US your weather. People did. Cloudy with breakthroughs. Breezy with patience. Scattered showers of grief. 10% chance of dancing. We poured and listened. Lily learned the art of Tessa refilled the mint without being asked. A woman my age bought 2 cups, one for yesterday, one for practice, and left a note in the jar. Thank you for not making me prove I'm tired. At the bench, strangers treated the plaque like a nudge from their better selves. A teacher graded there on Tuesdays to remind herself not to be cruel. Evan left the lid off his thermos like he'd saved Steam a seat. 2 teens sat in silence for 10 minutes that saved them an hour of trouble later. None of them knew I watched sometimes from across the path, pretending to text. The storm scratch on the plaque glinted less with oil and more with honesty. Lily brought a shoebox labeled scratches with a roll of starry washi tape and a theory. Scars equal stories you don't have to retell every time. We didn't tape the plaque. We taped the inside of our index card, the one with the rules, so the paper would live long enough to be read by people who need it. At Marcy's the bad chairs did their faithful wheeze. We kept our 30 and practiced leaving on time because nothing ruins a truce like a lingering compliment that turns into an argument with dessert. Tessa showed me a list her therapist had asked her to write, things she did without being asked. She read aloud like someone auditioning to keep her own job. Returned library books. Told the neighbor she was wrong about the laundry. Apologized without a coupon. Took a nap. Rest counts as respect, she said, and I wanted to embroider it on the backside of every pillow in America. We added a bench rule Lily wrote in pencil. If you're going to cry, do it in full sentences. It worked. Tessa practiced it once on my porch. She didn't ask for my inheritance at the end. I made soup, not a speech. When the power flickered again on a Sunday night, Tessa lit a candle and waited a full minute before touching her phone. Let the sound talk first, she said out loud, as if auditioning for her own better life. The lights returned like well-trained actors. I wrote a new sentence in the notebook. Church can be a porch when the wind listens. Communion can be soup. A vow can be a bench you share. One morning brought a clipboard and a young man who knocks like a courtesy. Utility, he said. We're checking on folks with medical devices. I told him Mrs. Green down the block uses oxygen and had probably already called his mother. He laughed, accepted a cold bottle of water handed on a small plate, Grace has manners, and moved on. 5 minutes later the power returned because kindness sometimes wears neon vests and drives a truck. We recorded an episode called How to Leave a Message That Doesn't Hold People Hostage. Ms. Ruth demonstrated, and we clapped after not because she asked us to, but because it's a rare skill. Mrs. Delgado called later to say the station phones were lighting up with thank yous and one complaint about our lemons. Good, I said. We're alive. Tessa asked if she could bring a friend to Sunday dinner. She needs to see what respect looks like at a table. May arrived with store bread warmed into usefulness and a sentence I kept. When in doubt, wash a dish. We made it a rule and wrote it in pencil under the others because shared chores are theology for the stubborn. Kayla, the young woman from the strip mall who once let Brandon audition his story, texted a picture of a houseplant that hadn't died and a sentence that glowed. Child support normal. Story quieter. Roots happening. I sent back 6 green hearts and an honest line. You're doing math with your life. Sylvia called with a suggestion disguised as logistics. Want me to put an annual beneficiaries review on your calendar like a checkup? We scheduled it for June with a note that read, Bring peonies. Wear comfortable truths. The city mailed a map. Little kindnesses. Our bench was stop 7. The icon was a lemon slice. I taped it to the fridge with the pear magnet. The kitchen sat up straighter. And because mercy likes to stack itself, I found a letter in my box with no return address. I'm the stranger who isn't, it read. I sit at your bench and go home kinder. Thank you for letting wood and words do their job. Evan. I slid it behind the sunrise photo. Proof begets proof. I brewed tea and thought about how many strangers I had been in my own life and how many benches I owed. November tried on restraint and kept it. The porch boards cooled. The rosemary remembered it's an herb, not a hedge. Lily's knock arrived with mitten logic. Tap tap, pause, tap, and a shoebox labeled weather station. Inside, a plastic rain gauge that promised truth and a small index card that read tell the weather you feel. Listen back. We mounted the gauge by the downspout and watched water translate. At St. Brigid's, Mr. Ortiz recorded himself telling his brother about casserole night. It tastes like people who remembered you exist, he said. Call me when the kettle sings. We sent it to a number in El Paso, and the reply arrived in emojis that looked like a parade. I thought about the way voice crosses rooms eating distance as if it had a spoon. The diner's bad chairs greeted us like faithful friends. We kept our 30 and asked the waitress about her grandson's spelling bee. Integrity again. The whole town studying the same word like we were cramming for a final. Tessa asked if she could add a view-only visit to our rituals. We'll make sure the light works, she said. We went with Sylvia, unlocked, narrated, relocked. When we left, Tessa slid the tiny receipt into her jacket and patted it once like a school kid. I'll forget to keep it, she said. You'll remind me. Or I won't, I said. And we'll still be fine. The bench did its winter job. People sat with collars up and thermoses open. The plaque took frost politely. The scratch told its story in a thinner voice but still told it. We wiped snow from the slats with our sleeves like good deacons. A man cried there once, quiet, full sentences, and left standing up straighter than when he'd arrived. Lily added a 6th rule. If you're mad, sit until you're heavy again. If you're sad, sit until your shoulders remember. We left it in pencil and let the season edit. I hung the yellow blouse at the back of the closet, not as exile but as rest. Some symbols do their best work unworn. The brass key stayed on the table except when I needed to remind myself I own a door. On Thanksgiving I burned the rolls and didn't burn the day. We ate pie with the satisfaction of people who know where the potholders live. May washed pans like therapy, and Tessa wiped the counter until it reflected a woman determined to be a better mirror. I'm practicing not auditioning, she said. For your approval. For my excuses. For a life I don't actually want. We didn't clap. We put leftovers into containers that made sense and wrote the date on each lid like women who intended to keep living. In December I drove to the cemetery with a thermos and a ridiculous scarf. Snow made the world honest. I sat on the bench we use when we visit this particular row and told my husband about the radio show and the bench and the way Lily's rules were starting to work on adults. You would have liked the plaque, I said. It speaks your language. After, I stopped at Marcy's because winter requires lemon bars and coffee that proves itself. Tessa found me there, unplanned, as if the town had set it up. We kept our 30, gave the waitress a tip big enough to say we noticed, and decided to test a new tradition. First Sunday in January, soup at your place. First Sunday in February, soup at mine. We wrote it down. Writing makes soup keep its promises. We recorded old news, Holidays without ruining the couch. Ms. Ruth taught how to praise sweaters that itch. Mrs. Quinn explained the wisdom of paper plates when the dishwasher dies. And I read a 2-minute piece on the dignity of leaving by 8. The station sent a fruit basket with a note that said, "You've upgraded our Tuesdays." We ate the oranges and took the bow to St. Brigid's to decorate a sign for the donation jar, "Devices and Dignity." Lily built a museum on my coffee table titled Things That Stayed Put. Exhibits included a field day ribbon that said participant and wore it like a crown, a jar of sand from last summer's beach, and the index card with the bench rules now outlined in silver pen. Tessa walked through the displays with the awe of someone touring a house that belongs to her future, not her past. "This is a good gallery," she said. "I'm trying to curate like this in my head." The porch light did its advent duty. The chimes learned a quieter key. I baked bread that remembered to rise. I turned the brass key in the lock each night and told the house, "Good work," because I like to reward excellence. On New Year's Eve, I slept like an honest soldier. Midnight came without needing me. In the morning, I brewed tea and wrote the only resolution that can be kept without a gym. Keep the porch light honest. Keep the kettle ready. Keep the bench available for weather reports. Spring humbles me every year with its audacity. The rosemary thought it was a tree again, the wind chimes remembered their scales, and the bench took back its ministry of shade. We recorded a special old news for the walking tour. The station played it on loop near stop 7 so strangers could hear Ms. Ruth explain why you say thank you to parks. The safe deposit review happened in June with peonies in my tote and comfortable truths on my tongue. "No changes," I told Sylvia. "Just proof I could." Tessa slid the receipt into her pocket and forgot to pad it. We left feeling like women who had kept a promise so ordinary it counts as a miracle. At dinner that Sunday, Lily recited a poem about pancakes you can fold. We applauded with the restraint her teacher requested. May washed one dish without being asked. Tessa wiped the counter and didn't announce it. We added nothing new to the rule card because sometimes the right work is maintenance. The city sent a photo of our bench at first light. In the corner, a man with a thermos. On the plaque, a square of sun. On the back, "You're not here, and somehow you are." I slid it behind the dusk photo. Layers upon layers, like a sandwich that never embarrasses you. The storm season returned and left a smaller scratch on a different corner of the plaque. We let it be, an asterisk that says, "Yes, we're alive." Lily suggested a new sign for our lemonade stand. "First glass free if you look tired. Second glass free if you're trying." We laughed and wrote it in marker. People came for sugar and left with posture. I took the yellow blouse from its hanger and held it, then hung it back. Some days you wear courage. Some days you let it watch you. I set the brass key on the table and placed my hand over it. It fit like a word I'd finally learned to pronounce. On a Tuesday, the station manager poked into the studio after our show. "Phones," she said, pointing with 2 fingers. "They're not ringing. People are listening." It sounded like the best kind of silence. It sounded like a whole town sitting until it was heavy again. That night I walked to the bench and found a stranger reading the plaque out loud. "Water respect," she said softly. "Gratitude grows." She looked up and saw me. "Thanks," she said. I needed someone to boss me around politely. "Anytime," I said, and sat at the other end with the distance kindness likes. The maple threw a patch of shade just our size. We didn't talk. We let the furniture do what it came for. Back home, under the lamp's honest circle, I opened the spiral notebook to a fresh page and wrote the sentence I'd been trying to land for a year and a half. I didn't win a war. I kept a promise. Then I added the line I promised myself I would keep saying until it was muscle memory. The biggest victory is signing in the right places, then stepping onto the porch. I underlined nothing. The ink dried without help. The house breathed with me. The chimes rested. And morning waited like a kettle, patient, sure, ready to sing.